ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਸ਼ਰੋਤਿਓ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ 88 FM।
ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਹੈ। ਹੁਣ ਦੱਸੋ ਸਾਰੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਕੀ ਹਾਲ ਚਾਲ ਹੈ। ਨੌਜਵਾਨੋ ਮੇਰੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਪਛਾਣੋ, ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਰ, ਵੱਡਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਸਤਿਕਾਰ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਕਾਮਯਾਬ ਬੰਦਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਕਰਾਂ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤਾਂ, ਸਿਖਾਵਾਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਖਾਣ ਲਈ ਬਣਾਉਣੀਆਂ ਸੌਗਾਤਾਂ। ਨਵੇਂ ਮੁੱਦਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਰੱਖਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਡਿਬੇਟ, ਫਰਮਾਇਸ਼ ਕਰਾਂ ਪੂਰੀ ਕਦੇ ਖਰੀਦਾ ਨਾ ਲੈ। ਮੈਂ ਪੂਰਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਦਾ ਨਾ ਪੱਖ ਖੜਾ, ਨਾਲ ਸਦਾ ਸੱਚ ਤੇ ਝੂਠਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਭੇਤ ਖੋਲਦਾ। ਓ ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ ਬੋਲਦਾ, ਓ ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ ਬੋਲਦਾ, ਓ ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ ਬੋਲਦਾ, ਓ ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ ਬੋਲਦਾ।
ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ 88 FM।
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ, ਆਦਾਬ, ਨਮਸਤੇ, ਖੁਸ਼ਾਮਦੀ। ਲਓ ਜੀ, ਐਨਵੀ ਸਿੰਘ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਲੈ ਕੇ। ਅੱਜ ਸਵੇਰੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਜੀ ਹਾਜ਼ਰੀ ਲੱਗ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਦੀ। ਜੀ ਹਾਂ, ਕੈਮਲਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅੱਜ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਜੀ, ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਹਾਜ਼ਰੀ ਲਗਵਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਪਰਮਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਪਾਪਾ ਚੋਟੇ ਭਾਜੀ ਦੀ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ। ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਨੇ ਬੜੇ ਅਹਿਮ ਨੇ। ਲੇਬਰ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ MP ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ, many making wage a theft crime. So it's gonna be ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਊਗੀ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਓਬਵੀਅਸਲੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਪੀਕਰ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਮਝ ਸਕਦੇ। ਸੋ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਸੋ ਲੈਟਸ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਦ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ। ਬਿਫੋਰ ਵੀ ਸਟਾਰਟ, ਵੀ ਵੁੱਡ ਲਾਈਕ ਟੂ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਆਲ ਦ ਲਿਸਨਰਸ। ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਹੀ ਲਿਸਨਰਸ ਦਾ ਵੈਲਕਮ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਸ ਸਮੇਂ who are listening to us from Hastings, 15:30 AM, Tauranga, Tipuki, Rotorua, Katikati, Para, Papamoa, Whakatane, Natia, 11:07 AM, Auckland 88 FM, and Hamilton 88.1 FM. And the people who are following us on Facebook and YouTube, they are also welcome. Let's welcome our guest today, Camilla. Hi, welcome. Kira, Shriakal, welcome to Radio Spice.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Camilla, I have a question. Like being an MP, because we know that we are going to talk about the bill, but just a little bit startup thing. How do you feel on this position when you are there? Like, they have a lot of responsibilities, people have a lot of questions to ask, and then you guys are ready to answer everything on the spot, or you need some kind of preparation all the time?
Well, obviously we are happy to engage with people. We do try and make sure that we're prepared for people's questions, so we wouldn't necessarily want to just think of our answers off the cuff in all circumstances, but obviously it's not practical in a lot of circumstances. So I guess a mixture of both. We do want to be prepared when we talk to people like yourself, especially when you've got a platform where your message is sent out to a lot of people. We wouldn't want to come and talk to you unprepared, but at the same time, there's no way you can prepare for everything. So I think it's important to have to know why you're in politics and to have those principles as well. So you fall back on those really when you maybe haven't been prepared for a question. I hope that answers it.
Thank you. Sorry for asking this, but like I always think that being an MP and ready to answer, because you never know when a reporter comes with his camera straight away to your face and asking something which you are even not aware. Like, oh, this thing happened. Like you guys are like doing a wonderful job being in opposition, making the other parties aware what the current leading government, making them aware what they need to do. So you have, like you said, that most recent bill has been passed, and today we are going to talk about that. It's like getting a very big issue, making wage theft crime. I would like to know about this in a detail. What do you think that this bill will going to bring to the normal employees in this country?
Thank you. Well, this was a very exciting bill to be a part of, in the sense that I think that it will hopefully mean that people are paid what they're owed in a deterrent sense. So people will know that that it's a crime now, and so employers might be quicker to pay people on time. But the main purpose of this bill is really to target a very small number of employers who intentionally steal from their employees. We know that most employers are good employers, and most employers always try to pay what their employees are owed. The other thing that we know is sometimes that there can be disputes in employment agreements, and people might not be sure what they're owed. This bill doesn't really cover those situations. This bill is really for a very small minority of employers who basically have it baked into their business model that they're going to take money that they're not entitled to from their employees. And it's very regretful that this happens in New Zealand. But unfortunately, in the past, if you are an employee that's has had an employer treat you in this way, the only option you've had is really to go to the civil courts. It's to go and put in paperwork into the High Court and see if you can get a hearing. And we think that's not really good enough for most other crimes, or all other crimes. If you know that there's been a theft that's taken place, you'd go to the police. That's what an employer would do if an employee stole. So it's really just about writing that balance and making sure that when employees are the ones who have their money taken away from them from their employer, they too, like employers, can go to the police and say, this is really unfair. There's no reasonable excuse. My employer has intentionally taken this money from me, and I want you to look into this person to see if there's a case to prosecute. So it's really about writing that balance and really making sure that employers know that, especially if it's intentional, especially if there's no reason for them to be withholding the money, they need to pay that money to their workers. And we know that it's been a problem that exists throughout New Zealand, but it has specifically affected a lot of new migrants to New Zealand, a lot of vulnerable workers. And so we're really pleased to see that those people will have the protection now of the law, so their money that they've worked so hard for is not taken in an unfair way by their employer.
Camilla, I have a question regarding this. Like you said previously, if employees steal from an employer, the employer has the right to go to the police. Now, employees will have the same thing. How we are going to protect few things. I'm not saying that all are, like as you already said, that not all the employers are thief and not all the employees are cheaters. But like there are people who can pretend that, oh, this happened without a knowledge, because employment rules and regulations are typically designed, those employment contracts, where most of the employees, sometimes they don't know that the thing they are demanding, it's not even in their contract. So they are making like claims about the leave, which they are not even entitled, and they think, oh, my leave money has been stolen. Can this gonna to be misleading the stuff, or the people who are gonna to look after this thing, making sure before taking into consideration that they consider all the facts, or they will just gonna to register the complaint against the employer. And I think if there are certain level of complaints against one employer, then it will be like striking a red strike on their career, on the profile as well. So how we are going to mitigate those things?
Yeah, so a couple of things in relation to that. This, because it's in the Crimes Act, it has the same threshold as any other crime for the police to take action against it. So the police prosecution guidelines only allow them to take cases against people when they think they're going to be successful in obtaining a conviction. So I don't think the police would, if an employee was mistaken, I don't think they would be likely to pursue that particular case, because they would, they might ask a couple of questions and they realise, oh, actually, this is just a dispute between an employee and employer. This is not something we can take any action on as the police. But like you said, if they get a lot of evidence about a particular employer, it seems to show a pattern of behaviour, there doesn't seem to be any reasonable excuse, because that's in the law. If there's a reasonable excuse for withholding that money, then that's not considered theft. It's also in the law that it has to be intentional. So it has to be something that the employer doesn't just make a mistake and then the employee can go to police. It has to be the employer intends to take that money. So those are a few protections to stop, I think, what you've suggested, which is you might just get in a disgruntled employee who, goes to the police. Well, I don't know if probably some of your listeners would have been to the police. If there's not a very strong case, they're not really going to pursue that because they won't be successful in that evidence. So really, I trust them, the police or other enforcement agencies, to make pragmatic, sensible decisions and to assist them in the law. We've made sure that it has to be intentional, and there can't be another reason that it's being withheld. So if it's withheld for a reasonable reason, then that means that the prosecution can't take place. So there's a couple of protections in there for to protect against what you're suggesting may occur.
Sorry if I'm gonna to be like too many questions, but I have another question. Based on the number of the police officers, as we all know that we have a limited resources of NZ Police. The recruitment, yes, they are recruiting on a fast track. We are making it a faster options. We are going to establish a new training center in Auckland as well, but it will take a time. Will these things gonna to back up like the priority things or not? Do you believe that bringing these cases to the police will gonna to put an extra load for police department or not?
Well, I think we do have an issue with police numbers in New Zealand, and the government has said that they will increase the numbers. And you might have seen an article yesterday that there's some doubt as to whether they'll be able to achieve that. So I think that is a valid concern to bring to consider and to bring to my attention as well. I don't. I think we do need to have a well-resourced police force. We do need to be able to make sure that we can prosecute crimes when they occur. I think the reality of what the police do is, I think in general they do a really good job prioritising issues. Unfortunately, with these wage theft cases, sometimes they can be really serious. They can mean that people don't have enough money to live on because of the amount of money that the employer is unfairly taking from their employee. And so in terms of the seriousness, I think these can be quite serious situations, and it can be the difference between someone getting by because they're paid what they're owed, or someone not being able to do that because their employer is unfairly withholding money from them. So I do think that in the extreme situations, especially when there's a pattern of behaviour from one employer, that should be something that the police consider taking a prosecution on. But I think you're right to say that we do need to, when we look at new crimes, and this government has had a lot of rhetoric around, making sure that they're tough on crime, we do need to make sure we do have the police force to be able to enforce that. So I think it's a really good point to raise, and I think it's one that we should think about, and I hope that, and I have trust that the police will make the best decisions they can in terms of the resourcing that they do have and in terms of the prosecutions that they do take. But I do want to emphasise that the wage theft can be really serious, and it can be the difference for people between making it or not making it and getting by. So I think it's an important consideration.
Yes, thank you for sorry for asking this question, but
No,
we all know that we are struggling with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, like making wage a theft crime, like if somebody is a victim of that, I would like to know the proper channel of that where they can go and report this. Yes, the police will gonna to deal in that, but I think it's like a non-life and yes, it's a serious crime, but it's not a risk of life. Yes, where if there is no immediate risk of life, we can say at one point, yes, it can be really tense moment for someone who found that his employer is stealing money when he's doing hard work, but it's not sorry if somebody feels like that, but I don't think so that it's a life-threatening situation, because it can be dealt over the time, and if there is a proper, so how the employers can go in a right way and to minimize the time of the police as well, because of the limited resources. Is there any kind of measurements which can be followed by an employee or employer where they believe that this is happening?
Yeah, so I think you're right. Often it won't be a life and death situation, although my experience, I previously was an employment lawyer before I became an MP, and one thing that really struck me in that work is how important work is to people in terms of their self-esteem, in terms of their mental health. When you have an issue with work, when you're badly treated at work, it can really affect people, and that can end up being quite serious for them in terms of their own lives. So I think sometimes it can be a really serious matter how you're treated at work. And the second thing I'd say is yes, there can be other thefts that occur. For example, people who own shops, if someone takes something minor from their shop, obviously it's not a life and death situation, but it's something they probably would log with police. Similarly, if an employee thinks that their employer is stealing with them, they can go through, obviously not the emergency number, but they can report it to police or to the Labour Inspectorate to say that they think that a theft's been occurred. But what I'd really encourage people to do at first instance, if they feel that their employer has stolen from them, is really to contact that employer and say, this is what I believe has occurred, and get an official statement back from the employer. Hopefully that will resolve it. Maybe they'll realise that, now this is a crime, and the next step might be that they'll go to the police. Hopefully the employer can resolve it with the employee in that instance. But then they can, obviously if the employer doesn't resolve it, they have the option to go to the police, which is really the benefit of this law for those extreme situations. For employers, there isn't really anything extra employers need to do. I do believe most employers in New Zealand are good employers. None of them will be intentionally stealing from their employees in the vast majority of cases. So really it's just about the current obligations that an employer has. Do your PAYE, make sure that you're paying the correct amount of holiday pay, make sure that you're just meeting the contractual entitlements that you have to your employee. If you do that, there's no way this law is going to affect you at all. So it's really no additional work for an employer. And it just, good employers will be doing the right thing anyway. So they can carry on as per usual. And if they ever were to get an inquiry from an employee about, a discrepancy in wages, just respond to that in the best way that they can. If they've made a mistake, rectify it, then this law won't affect them.
Thank you. Thank you for answering. And this bill is just I know the employee who is going to make a complaint, he should be having a knowledge, but sometimes there are the typical wordings and other things which a common man can't understand, because even if we look on an employer contract, it looks pretty standard throughout the New Zealand. We don't have very hi-fi things in there. It's just a small modifications. But in this bill, there might be some terms which the employee needs to understand. So if they need a guidance on this bill, where they can find this one? This is my last question. Sorry for taking it too much time.
I hope this is a very short bill, and it doesn't really, I don't think it would be something that would require employers to check in with their lawyers. Often when we have employment law changes, that would be something that people would be advised to do. Go see a lawyer, make sure your contract's consistent with that. And I used to do that as a lot in my previous life when I was a lawyer. However, this is really about extreme cases of stealing from your employees. So I don't think employers really need to worry too much about getting extra advice on it. As long as they're sure that they're paying their employees what they are owed in terms of their wages, as long as they're sure that they're paying what they're owed in terms of holiday pay, as long as they haven't had any complaints about that, I wouldn't think that there was anything that they necessarily had to do. If they feel like maybe they could, maybe they're not sure that those things are correct, then that would be the instance that they should go and see a lawyer, just to make sure that they're complying with their obligations as a first step. But I think that would be a good thing actually. Even if this law hadn't passed, it would have been a really good idea for them just to make sure that they're complying with their legal requirements anyway. So hopefully this doesn't create any additional bureaucracy, but it actually just allows extreme situations where you do have that very small minority of employers that really do take what they're not owed intentionally, and that there'll be some consequences for that. So we did say when it passed it was a tough on crime bill. I agree with that. I think that it is. It's about making sure that people who do commit crimes, not mistakes, not things that they might have forgotten about, just when they actually are intentionally stealing from their employees and they don't have an excuse, that there are consequences for those actions.
Yeah. Anything you would like to add before we move to the next point, which is very important, which the next bill is coming? Before that, we discuss if you feel that, I would like to add this thing, this hasn't been asked to me in this one. So anything which you think from your side we might be missing about this bill, which needs to be making aware the people should know about that, please feel free to say that before that we go to the next bill.
Sure. No, I think this bill it's a good bill. It's a tough on crime bill. It only really applies in situations where there's a crime that's been committed, when there's intentional stealing from an employer to an employee, similar to when a employee steals from an employer. Now you've got a remedy to take that to an enforcement agency and to get that seen to. It's really that simple. It shouldn't create any additional work for employers, and it will give employees the right to make sure that they don't have to go through a complicated process of the civil courts if they do have that theft taken from them from their wages. So that's the bill, and hopefully it has a good effect on making sure that everyone's treated fairly in New Zealand workplaces.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this information. Now, moving to the next thing, which is a very important bill. I think it's gonna to be, you guys are proposing this bill to stop employers for preventing workers talking about wages. It's a new thing. I know most of when you go in a company, the employer says, do not discuss your wages to the other employees, which sometimes I think a hardworking person is getting less wages compared to another person, or employee who does a lot of work compared to one other manager. It's like on a high level, because I think it's not on a lower level. I'm not differentiating anything, but yes, it's on the management level where they says do not discuss your salary or something once you are promoted to the supervisors or management level. How this bill gonna to be helpful in the future? We would like to know the proposal. What are the grounds which you are gonna to bring for proposing this bill in the parliament, and how it will gonna to help people?
Thank you. Yeah, so this is a members' bill that has been drawn from the ballot. It's currently before Select Committee at the moment, and it's a bill against pay secrecy. So in the last parliament, the Select Committee that I was on, the Education and Workforce Select Committee, had an inquiry into pay transparency, and pay transparency is really a concept that seeks to fight against discrimination and pay differentiation in wages. So in New Zealand, we've got a gender pay gap. So men are typically paid on average a lot more than women. And we've also got an ethnicity pay gap. So Māori and Pacific women in particular, on average, are paid a lot less than a Pākehā man. And so the pay transparency idea is really to throw some sunlight onto that problem and see if there's more transparency around pay, if some of these discriminatory outcomes and unfairness in relation to pay can be addressed. So this bill that I proposed is not a full pay transparency regime. We did, when we were in government, Labour was in government, propose implementing a full pay transparency regime. We did not have the opportunity to do that because we lost the election. So this bill is not a full pay transparency regime that would require organisations over a certain level to publish their pay information. It's really a much smaller than that, and I think it would work really well with a pay transparency regime in the future. But this particular bill just means that an individual employee can talk about their own wages without fear of being disciplined or without fear of losing their job if they do that. And the reason that this is an important issue is we do have some contracts in New Zealand that say you're not allowed to talk about your wages. We also have employers who, as you said at the beginning, discipline employees when they do talk about their own wages. And technically, if you have a clause in your contract that says you can't talk about, disclose your wages to anyone, that even covers your family. That even covers maybe your partner, your wife, your husband. We know that the reality is you're going to need to tell them how much that you're being paid in most circumstances. So it's really a practical bill that looks at the real nature of how people interact with each other. And also, I think, would hope to, if there was a workplace, say, where someone was getting paid a lot more than someone else, if they discussed that and they found out that there was a discrepancy in pay, often it's the higher paid person that gets in trouble, which is really interesting. So it'd be the person who's on the higher wages, and the employer will come back to them and say, oh, why did you tell, that ex-employee that got paid more? And, now he or she wants to get paid the same amount as you. And that's not really fair, because if you want to share that information, and there's nothing in this bill at all that would require you to share it, but if you want to talk to your buddy or something at work and say, this is what I get paid, it comes up in conversation, then I think that you should be able to do that without being disciplined for it. And I think I think that's a normal human behaviour, but the advantage of it is that it may also help to throw some light on some of these practices that we know happen. So we know that there are some issues in the gender pay gap and the ethnicity pay gap that can't be accounted for through experience. They can't be accounted for through anything legitimate. It's just, maybe it was starting salary, whatever it is, it ends up being that some people in New Zealand are paid a lot more than other people, and there is a very strong correlation with their gender and their ethnic background. And I think we need to do more to address that. I think a full pay transparency regime would be the best, but short of that, this bill, which allows those conversations to take place, is a really good start, and would just allow some, greater freedom for employees in the workplaces to have these conversations about pay.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting thing, actually, because I know I've been on these kind of positions, and we know that if you are discussing with your buddies, you can be in a trouble because they don't want to discuss what they are actually getting. And sometimes the feeling comes when you come to know from some other person, oh, we heard that he's getting this much, so that means you are getting the same wage, and you are not allowed to say anything. You just say, oh, I don't know. And they think it's being rude when you are being very friendly to those buddies, especially when you are sharing drinks and other things, and all of a sudden somebody asks you a random question, hey, what's your increase now? And you don't want to discuss it because you know that you will be in a trouble. You ring the bell, you are out. So, and I think sometimes people just talk it unintentionally with other people, and then they get into trouble. So I think it's going to be a real good thing. But do we believe that bringing this kind of bill, how will the employers going to react on this one? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, when we had the select committee process, and it's still ongoing, but we have finished the public submissions, the vast majority of them were very in support of this bill. So that was really interesting. So we did get a lot of support from that. But we did, we have thought about the potential of, employers thinking that this isn't a good thing. And, I can see that sometimes anything that rocks the boat for employers is sometimes seen in a negative light. But I mean, I do think that it's really important to remember that employers and employees, they all have a duty of good faith in employment relationships. That's the foundation principle in the Employment Relations Act, is the duty to act in good faith, and that applies to employers and employees. So really, this doesn't, and I wouldn't imagine that this applies to bad faith disclosures, because that's not allowed anyway under New Zealand law. So it's really just to allow people to have freer conversations, to talk about things in a normal way with their colleagues, and to not get into trouble about that. And interestingly, it has been something that's come in other jurisdictions as well. So it's something that's people are considering around the world as a way, and particularly in the States, they've been looking at, the fact that you should be able to talk about your wage, and they call them, gag clauses, that they don't want to have those. So this bill wouldn't outlaw them, but it would just mean that if you did have a contract where there was a gag clause in it, then it would be unenforceable, in the sense that you wouldn't be able to be disciplined for it, and you wouldn't be able to be sacked as a result of any disclosure you made underneath that. Of course, if that was in good faith, which imbues all of New Zealand employment law anyway.
Thank you for sharing that information. Just the last thing, anything which you would like to put a light on this one, maybe, which I might gonna forget to ask you, just on the last note, because I know the time is running and your time is precious. You are doing a great job, and being in that position, being an MP, you are always busy and doing a lot of things. So just like on a good note, what else you think that needs to be make people aware about this new proposal?
Well, first of all, it's gone through its first reading. It passed first reading with the support of the National Party. It's now at select committee. It will come back to the House for its second reading. I'm really encouraging people, if they do support this particular bill, to get in touch with MPs from other political parties who might want to support it. We've had support in the past from the National Party, the Green Party, and Te Pāti Māori. So if you have a local MP who's a national MP and you support this bill, I'd encourage you to get in touch with them and let them know why you think that this is important. Also, just to note that this bill is just to allow these conversations to take place. It doesn't mean you have to share any information about your wages. It's just to allow those normal conversations that happen between partners and husbands and wives and colleagues and friends in the workplace, to allow you to talk about that, to get some more sunlight onto your pay. And it's quite a common saying, but sunlight is the best form of disinfectant. So I think the more transparency we have about pay, the fairer the outcomes will be. So that's really my objective with bringing this bill.
Thank you for sharing all the information, and I wish you all the best for your future proposals as well. And I hope that these bills will going to bring a little bit change to the employees, because the work stress, which we are discussing a lot these days, that on a high level jobs there are a lot of work stress. I think this is one of the other factors which is causing them to stress while doing the work, because it's always going in their mind whether I'm getting the right pay or not. Should I discuss, should I not discuss? And I have here people talking randomly to the random peoples where they know that their identity will not be disclosed. And I think it's in there, and it's like giving a stress. I think this will be a big stress reliever for those who think that they can't discuss. I wish all the best, and for the future things as well. Thank you for giving us such time and sharing this information. I'm really thankful on the behalf of the Radio Spice management team, and we would love to get you on the radio again in the future for more things. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been an honour to be interviewed by you. Amazing questions, and I'd love to come back if I can in the future too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. ਸੋ ਲਓ ਜੀ, ਇਹ ਸਨ ਲੇਬਰ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਤੋਂ ਕੈਮਲਾ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਬਿੱਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ। ਸੌਰੀ, ਮੈਂ ਮਾਫੀ ਚਾਹੂੰਗਾ ਜੇਕਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦਿੱਕਤ ਆਈ ਹੋਵੇ, ਬਟ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੁਐਸਚਨਸ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰ ਲਾਇਰਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਬਿੱਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਆਉਣ ਨਾਲ ਕੁਝ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦਾ ਫਰਕ ਪਊਗਾ। ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਅੱਗੇ ਥੈਫਟ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਲੋਕ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਇੱਕ ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰ ਚੈਨਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ, ਸਾਡੇ ਇੰਪਲੋਇਰ ਨੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਜੀ ਛੁੱਟੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਪੇ ਕੱਟ ਲਈ, ਸਾਡੀ ਉਹ ਪੇ ਕੱਟ ਲਈ, ਜਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੱਤੀ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਹ ਕਵਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੱਤਾ, ਸਾਡਾ ਹੌਲੀਡੇ ਪੇ ਕੱਟ ਲਈ 8% ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਰਾਈਟ ਸੀ ਐਜ਼ ਅ ਕੈਜੂਅਲ ਇੰਪਲੋਏ। If you believe that this is happening, please go through a right channel. ਇੱਕ right channel ਦੇ ਥਰੂ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ voice raise ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ ਤੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕੇਸ ਰਜਿਸਟਰ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਪਰ ਇੱਕੋ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦਾ ਧਿਆਨ ਰੱਖਿਓ, ਫੇਕ ਕੰਪਲੇਂਟਸ ਨਾ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣ। ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰ ਗਰਾਊਂਡਸ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਪਰ ਅੰਡਰਸਟੈਂਡ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਸ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਤਰਤੀਬਵਾਰ ਲਾ ਕੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਲਾਅ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਫੈਕਟਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦਾ। ਸੋ ਰਾਦਰ ਦੈਨ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੇ ਬੈਕਫਾਇਰ ਹੋਣ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪੂਰੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ। ਦੂਸਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਿੱਲ ਪ੍ਰਪੋਜ਼ਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚਲਿਆ ਗਿਆ, ਜਿਹਦੀ ਕਿ ਫਸਟ ਹੀਅਰਿੰਗ ਕੰਪਲੀਟ ਹੋ ਚੁੱਕੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਇੰਪਲੋਈਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਹਾਇਰ ਪੋਜੀਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ, ਉਹ ਆਪਣੀ ਵੇਜ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਮਿਹਨਤਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਮਿਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ ਦਿੱਕਤਾਂ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਿੱਲਸ ਨੇ ਇਹ ਆ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਨੇ। ਸੋ ਵਧੇਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਰਹੋ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ, ਮਿਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਅਗਲੇ ਰੰਗ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਅਗਲੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਜੇਕਰ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਅਪਸ਼ਬਦ ਬੋਲਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਹੋਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਬ੍ਰੌਡਕਾਸਟਿੰਗ ਅਥਾਰਟੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਨਾਜ਼ਰ ਜਾਣ ਕੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਾਫੀ ਚਾਹੂੰਗਾ। ਸੁਣਦੇ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਰੋ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਰੇਡੀਓ, ਸਮੇਂ ਦੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼, ਹਰ ਸਮੇਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਅੰਗ ਸੰਗ।
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਪਿਆਰੇ ਸਰੋਤਿਓ, ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ 88 FM।
ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਹੈ, ਹੁਣ ਦੱਸੋ ਸਾਰੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਕੀ ਹਾਲ ਚਾਲ ਹੈ। ਨੌਜਵਾਨੋ ਮੇਰੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਪਛਾਣੋ, ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਰ, ਵੱਡਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਸਤਿਕਾਰ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਕਾਮਯਾਬ ਬੰਦਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਕਰਾਂ ਮੁਲਾਕਾਤਾਂ, ਸਿਖਾਵਾਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਖਾਣ ਲਈ ਬਣਾਉਣੀਆਂ ਸੌਗਾਤਾਂ। ਨਵੇਂ ਨਵੇਂ ਮੁੱਦਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਰੱਖਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਡਿਬੇਟ, ਫਰਮਾਇਸ਼ ਕਰਾਂ ਪੂਰੀ ਕਦੇ ਖਰੀਦਾ ਨਾ ਲੈ। ਮੈਂ ਪੂਰਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਦਾ ਨਾ ਪੱਖ ਖੜਾ, ਨਾਲ ਸਦਾ ਸੱਚ ਤੇ ਝੂਠਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਭੇਤ ਖੋਲਦਾ। ਓ ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ ਬੋਲਦਾ, ਓ ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ ਬੋਲਦਾ, ਓ ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਪਾਈਸ ਵਾਇਸ ਬੋਲਦਾ